Hey there, YouTube. Welcome back. This is the Allegheny Northern in N-scale, and no, your eyes are not deceiving you. That was a BNSF locomotive that is typically running on Norfolk Southern tracks. And thanks to the modern operating theory of least power, I can get away with that. So, let's go through the March 2022 update. This is everything that's been happening in the month of March, and it is a short list of things. So follow along, and I'll give you an update also on some things that are coming around the corner as far as future projects. First, it's been nothing but toggles. Lots and lots and lots of toggles for all of the turnouts on the layout. I am now complete with the entire upper deck, and I have only the second half of the lower deck and the peninsula to do. So the peninsula is here, and quite frankly, this peninsula is just slightly, I think, over 2 feet. I can reach it from side to side. The scenery is all low, so all of the turnouts are very readily accessible. Even with a full terminal here, you can still reach the ones on the far side without hitting anything. So it's low priority. The higher priority is to get the power plant, the Y, and then of course all of the interchange tracks in the back, which are the most difficult because without stretching, I can basically reach the main line. You can, I mean, it's not impossible to reach back here. You can get to these tracks. You just got to get real close to the scenery, and so it's just better to have them remote. And then of course this small switching district here, this all needs to be remoted in. There is still 30 turnouts, that's right, 30 that need to be added between all of the crossovers and then the industry switches. So it's going to still be a daunting task. But hey, it's down from 80. There's 30 left. That means I have 50 of these little guys wired up. And you know what? It is nice to be able to throw the switch and see the switch move up above. So that's cool. I will have to spray paint where these toggles go. I made it very easy to follow. Basically, the toggle is right next to whatever switch it controls. So, this turnout, this one, this turnout, this one, this guy's all by himself. So, obviously, you'd look here and say, well, it's got to be that one. Yep. So, it's not real complicated to figure out where it goes, but I do want to put it on there and also label it. It'll just look a little more professional. You can also see that I opted to move these up, and the reason for that is all of the turnout wiring actually runs in a trough cut in the foam up here. The reason being is I didn't want everything, there was so much wire, I didn't want it all hanging out. I didn't want to cut it short just because, who knows, I might move the layout someday and I wanted to have the wire. So I built these troughs, I tucked it all in, and then I am slowly covering it with this foam core. The reason I'm using the foam core, I do not want to, this is the intermodal yard, right? So this is going to be a lot of concrete, a lot of paved over track, and I don't want to fill this all with plaster and put all that weight up on here. So using the foam core, very light material, hot glued down, lets me bring the actual amount of material that I need to plaster, so to speak, up towards the top of the rails here, so it's just a very thin coat. I put enough hot glue on the foam that I'm not worried about it curling, and then I use a very dry mixture on the first layer to just sort of set this in place, and then I haven't had any issues, as I will show you here in just a moment, on the downtown area. But so I started filling this in here and just trying to get the big areas. I wanted it as flat as possible, but if there's a little bump, I'm not worried about it because it's getting a topping coat over it. So these 2 tracks here will be for the auto racks, and then all of these other tracks, of course, will be receiving and departing for the terminal. So that's coming along. I'm happy with where that is. Let's jump over to the city. I'll show you where I spent most of this month's efforts. So I promised myself that I would never do a video where I preach to you about the philosophy of model railroading. And there are channels on YouTube. If you feel that model railroading needs a philosophy, you can tune to. and get that insight. This channel is not going to do that because I don't see any place for it here. But for those of you that need it, I'm sure you can find it. There is, however, one thing that popped up in Model Railroader recently, and it was an article about quiet spaces. And as I show you a bustling intermodal yard, and then realize right behind it I have, well, what constitutes as a quiet space on my layout, and it's hidden. You actually don't really see it because it's so quiet. Well, there's the main line right there, and if we give it a few seconds, you will see a train, yep, stake through the forest there. But all of my scenes are relatively close together, and with the typical way that model railroading goes, you try to cram as much stuff as you possibly can into the allowable space. And the purpose of what I'm doing here is to show you that here's a scene. So this is a downtown scene, right? And I am going to let this train pass. And all of my scenes, for the most part, are very urban. So they look like this. They look like they belong in downtown middle America somewhere, or in this case, in the Alleghenies. And so watching the trains come through here, I get enjoyment from scenes like this because it is the type of railroading that I grew up with around Pittsburgh. And to me, this is a busy scene, but it's busy and realistic. And I wish that I had more, say, quiet scenes on the layout. And what I mean by quiet scenes is what they defined as basically scenes where there was nothing but scenery. And N-scale really does offer you that opportunity to have beautiful scenery around your layout. And I do have those scenes in places just like this where the train is, yes, the part of it's still snaking through the city, part of it's in the next city already, but if you follow along a main line, at least what I'm used to, it does kind of do this where you'll have an area where, yeah, there's not much happening, but the city is right there on the other side. So it's not far away. So I've justified it that way. And the trade-off that I get from that is operational interest. So the layout, when you appear from a further vantage point, is busy, right? There's a lot going on. There's a lot of different scenes, but this layout was meant to be viewed in smaller segments. And so I took the information that they had in this article, which I did enjoy. I found it very insightful, actually, and tried to apply it to building better scenery view blocks so that I could still have that busy scene that I wanted, still have all of those downtown industrial looks, and still incorporate the wilderness into it and make it all look correct. So when you look through this layout, and the reason I bring this up is the next video that's going to come out is going to be a layout tour to welcome all of the new members. That was the goal here, was to get as much action into the layout as humanly possible while still allowing for some reasonable sense of scenery in between. So I'm still working on some of that detail, but I feel like this layout has captured a lot of that goal for me. To do it over again, I probably would want a bigger space. I know what model railroader doesn't. And I probably would put more empty scenes between my cities. But once again, I went for the operational impact of the layout over the wilderness look. So, for a quiet scene for me is always the main line is somewhere and it's sort of view blocked so that if you're down at the layout level, it's back there and you can see the train moving, but not really. And then there's some sort of operational thing happening so that you have something to do with the layout rather than just watch trains. But it gives you the ability to work the layout and also to watch the layout. Okay, that's enough. No more philosophy. Let's go on with the update. Okay, so this has been the main area of focus for the layout work progress in March. And this is the upper area. I'm calling it the city area, mainly because right now it's not named. But what it is the first section of the upper layout that was built. It sits between the Y where the intermodal yard splits off from the rest of the layout. It is a reverse looping section that links to the staging yard behind the wall here. And it is designed as sort of a local. I'm treating it more than a local. It's more of a branch line, a second class railroad. And I'm using it to basically add more switching opportunities to the layout. So what I've done here is I've got the lumber mill, which is going to occupy those two tracks there in the back, the one that goes through the shed and the one right next to it. Then I've got one track here that's going to be a refueling where my single locomotive, which is an SD40-2 for the Wheeling and Lake Erie Railroad, who is the owner of these rails. Its locomotive is going to sit right there with the fueling depot, which is right there. And then I've got two stations. One is going to be a station here, and the other one is going to sit over there. And the purpose of that is to have a reason for the Amtrak trains to make it to the upper level. Without those two stations, they really wouldn't have a purpose to come up here. So what's going to end up happening is for Amtrak to service this station, it's going to come up here. It's going to run the main line down around the coal. It's going to take the main line into the tunnel where it's going to have to do basically a double back. It's going to have to cut off and run around its own train to pull itself back out. Or it may do a reverse maneuver. I haven't decided yet. That's going to determine how it services this station here, because that's not a Y. So it's either got to pull all the way back into station or into staging, and it's going to decouple, run around its train again, and then pull it back through. Or what it's got to do is it's got to do a shoving maneuver. So I haven't figured out exactly how I'm going to do that yet. It might be two separate trains that run at two separate times. So that's an option too. I don't know yet. But as far as what I did in the last month, other than try to figure out how I could complicate my operations, I got all of the rail painted. So it's not the shiny metal rail anymore. I started adding some grasses and some shrubs and all that sort of stuff. Put in most of the ballast, put in the sculpted mold to get the shape of the terrain, and then I built those two little hillsides to hide the hole in the wall. Those hillsides are just shaped foam board, painted, and scenic. They do need to have trees put in them. I have super trees that need to be built. I just haven't gotten to it yet. And then that will hide that area effectively. Yes, I am a little worried about that switch being buried. It's basically an inaccessible switch. You can't really reach it through the hole in the ground or a hole in the wall there, and you can't really reach it from the front. So making sure that is in good operating condition is going to be pretty freaking key. It is toggled in, so I can throw it remotely. I don't know if you can see it in the video, but it is throwing remotely there. So that is majorly handy. It's just going to be it's one of those things, it's a bad spot. But that's where a lot of my energy has gone into setting this up. Once again, here is an example of that foam core board with a very thin layer of drywall mud over the top of it, just to give it something to bite onto. I will put a smooth it layer on top of it for the parked areas, or just set the building scenery on top of it if it doesn't get that, whatever it is. But this is going to be a building pad here. I've got two places for building pads. One might be a parking lot for the railroad company. The other one is going to be the fueling depot, like I mentioned. I've got the stations on either side. So those are done. I've got the first building pad over here in place. I need one in the back. Then I'm building buildings to fill out the rest of the scene. It's going to get a little more green space between the Y and then the intermodal yard at the far end there. So this end of the Y, where the locomotive's sitting roughly to the wall over that land bridge there, that is all going to be just peaceful scenery and no structures or anything like that. So this is where most of the effort in March happened. The other thing that I built in March was all of that time that went into the diorama for the winter scenery stuff. So if you watched how I did the winter scenery, I had to build that diorama for this and for that video, and I know those videos were pretty long, so the skip button there is your friend. It's over an hour, almost 2 hours actually of content, but I tried to cover every possible scenery item I could think of related to snow, and I think I got most of it, if not all of it. So You know, that was quite a project. That took a lot of time. So that's where most of the modeling effort in March went to. So some of the 3D printed objects that you see on that, I had to paint and weather and all that sort of thing. That all happened in March as well. So I guess that's more of an update as well. Now the next video that comes out is going to be a full layout tour. I'm going to start a train in one area, and we're going to go through the whole layout. I'm going to tell you how it fits into the scheme operationally, and then I'm also going to I'll tell you why I did what I did there. But I'm going to give you a full tour and give you an update of what I'm planning for each of those areas. We've added enough new members now that I think we're probably overdue for that. So we'll go from section to section, and I will tell you this is what I'm planning. And none of the areas are obviously done. Even the areas that are the most done, which is this particular section of the layout, I still am thinking of things to add. Obviously, signals is one of the big things. So getting these toggles all put in place was one of the key things that had to happen before the signals went in, because some of the signals are going to actually run off of the circuit that is for these toggles for the different dwarf switches, signals and things like that. So order of operations, I just had to go through this painful process first before I can start signaling. But that looks like it's going to be a 2022 project to start signaling. So I'm kind of excited about that, because even though I've chosen a system that's fairly simple as far as operation goes, it is going to add a level of realism that the layout currently doesn't have. So I'm pretty excited about that. Okay, that's it for the month of March. Stay tuned for the video on the full layout tour. And after that, it'll probably be an update on April. And April's probably going to be a light month, just because all of the weekends in April have already been spoken for one event or another. So it's going to be light fare down here in the train room. So until next time.